Hey folks, this is Color and Chemist. My name is Connie and welcome back to my channel. So today I would like to talk about paper. And I feel like this is partly an informational video, partly an apology, hopefully not partly also just a bunch of excuses, but I do apologize if that's sort of what it feels like. I have been promising in, I think, at least 2 videos, a color along in this Kirby book, Kaleidomorphia. And it was to be a color along using Pitt Pens or Staedtler pens. And then I think I narrowed it down to just using Staedtler pens. Yeah. And these, of course, are the pigment-based pens that I have been talking about a lot in recent videos. The Staedtler Pigment Brush Pen, and then sort of the, what's the phrase? The OG, the original, Faber-Castell Pitt Artist Pens. Both of these types of pens are unique in that it's water-based ink, so it's not an alcohol-based ink, but they are pigment-based colorants as opposed to dye-based colorants. Things like Tombows, those sort of markers are also water-based ink markers, but they are dye-based inks. So these pigment ink pens, they're kind of a unique beast. I love coloring with them. And just a lot of you have asked for color alongs. Now, I don't actually have a lot of color alongs on my channel, partly because I kind of feel like I'm not good enough, or I don't know. For those of you that aren't aware, my day job is as a chemistry instructor, chemistry teacher. And so I do love teaching. I love teaching people things. But I feel the best and I feel the most confident when I really know my subject matter. And so I know chemistry, so I love teaching chemistry and I feel confident teaching chemistry. But when it comes to art and coloring, I feel like such a newbie. My brain is it's kind of an outdated term, but I'm very, very left-brained. And so my brain doesn't naturally take to art. Yeah, and I tend to struggle a lot with visual, although I do have a very good visual memory, I don't have a very good spatial eye or an eye for color. So all of those things basically add up to I don't feel confident in my coloring abilities. So I do struggle when it comes to doing color alongs because I feel like, well, I don't know enough. Is there any point to me teaching these types of things? But I understand that not a lot of folks color with those pigment type pens. And so, I would like to be able to offer color alongs or coloring tips or that sort of thing using those pens because it's kind of a unique tool that we have to color. So I started and I actually filmed probably about 2 hours worth of coloring on this page. And I'll show you what I've done so far. So the background is using the Zig, where'd I put it? Oh, there it is. The Zig Art Graphic Twin. This is a water-based pen as well, but this is water-based dye ink. So this is not like the pigment ink pens. But, so it is like a Tombow. But the significant difference, I think, is the brush. On virtually all other water-based pens, Tombow, the Ohuhu brands, you can get a lot of really, just sort of cheap brands on Amazon. They all have fiber brush nibs. And even Tombows, which are lovely pens, but it's still a fiber nib, which means after a while, it kind of goes mushy and it breaks down. These Zig Art Graphic twin markers are unique. I've never seen another water-based, dye-based ink marker pen with a lovely, lovely foam rubber nib. And I don't know if you can you see the point on that thing? That will stay pointy like that from day one to whenever it runs out of ink. It also does have kind of it's like a small bullet nib. I rarely ever use that end. Because the point on this stays so pointy, you can get into tiny spaces. I color with these. I do have a full set of 80. I think 80 is the full color amount. And I do sometimes color with them. But the black I buy open stock through markersupply.com online. Because the black and this is where we get into paper, on quite a few papers gives this incredible streak-free black, kind of rich black background. And that's hard to get with a water-based pen. I don't know if you've ever tried to do like a black background, a solid black background with like a Tombow. It's streaky. And most water-based pens are. Now, I don't know if this is less streaky because of that foam rubber nib, or maybe there's a different formulation of ink. The ink in these seems to sort of stay on the surface of the paper a bit longer than most other pens of this type. But yeah, now because it's water-based, it doesn't tend to bleed through. Although these are such juicy pens, you do sometimes, and I did, let's see here, I got a little tiny bit of, well, okay, right along the edge was because I went right to the edge, and again, it's so juicy, it sort of sucks into the other side of the paper. There's a little bit of ghosting down there. Maybe a little bit of ghosting up here. I was actually doing the black background with a pen that was almost running out of ink, so I was kind of going back over areas, which I don't often have to do, particularly if I have a nice sort of new juicy pen. But yeah, I mean, you could get a non-streaky black background with an alcohol marker, but then, I mean, it would go right through to the other side. And this, again, this did a little bit, but that's okay. And then I started doing some coloring with the Staedtler pens. So I think I had a selection of colors picked out here. I think, yeah, some of these leaves were, it was like some of the yellow greens, and then I was using some of the yellows to get some of the brighter highlights. But here's the thing. I got this far, and I started to think, while I know I can finish this page, and it'll be okay, and it'll probably show up, maybe I'm filming this kind of close to the end of July 2024. It might show up in my July 2024 completed pages. We'll see. I know I can finish this page, but I don't know if I can coach other people to finish this page. Here's the thing. This is the first Kirby picture I've ever done. And I know that's kind of blasphemous. I actually only have 3 Kirby books. I have this, which is Kaleidomorphia. I have Fragile Worlds. And I do technically have another page started in Alien Worlds, but it's done with Inktense. Here's the difference between this book and this book. I mean, obviously they're different books. Can you see the spelling of the word color? See that? C-O-L-O-U-R. Coloring challenges. C-O-L-O-R. This is a US version of a Kirby book, and it is printed by Plume. It says on the spine there. If it has any further info anywhere. Leave the back. Penguin Random House, LLC. It says printed in the United States, second printing. This Kirby book, not that I've done any Pitt pen coloring in here either, but this was printed in China copyright Michael O'Mara books, and the UK versions of Kirby books will say LOM art, L-O-M. This paper is different than this paper. And I think that's why I was struggling. And I mean, not that I've done pigment ink coloring in the other Kirby book, but so often on YouTube, you'll see folks doing color alongs, doing incredible, beautiful, awesome work. And I don't know about you, I've not done a whole lot of color alongs, but I have sort of, you know, people have given tips, and I've done the same. Given tips about, you know, doing this, doing that, and here's a technique, and you can try this. It doesn't always work out, does it? At least it does it for me. You know, I'll try what they did. Now, it could totally be user error. Totally. Because I'm not an artist. I'm a chemist. And I don't have that storehouse of techniques. I didn't go to school. It's not the way my brain naturally works. So it could completely be user error. But I feel like sometimes we ignore paper. Not totally. There's lots of videos out there, you know, where folks talk about the best pencil and the best paper and what's the best pencil to use in these books. So I understand that people have talked about this, but I also think sometimes, and I'm guilty of this too, we kind of forget a little bit, and we'll see a technique, and we may even think, okay, I'm going to take that exact page, you know, following color on. I'm going to get that exact page in my copy of, you know, whatever the book is, and I'm going to do exactly what that person was doing on screen. And for me, anyway, with the hopes that my page looks, you know, if not exactly like their page, pretty close. And particularly when we're using the same book. So if somebody was, you know, they were going to do a color along with me, so they got out their copy of Kaleidomorphia. Or because I believe this is a compilation, Kaleidomorphia is a compilation book, right? I'm sorry if I'm wrong on that. I think it is. You know, maybe this picture is in, I don't know what other book of his this is in. So anyway, you would get your book and this you know, your version of this picture, and you're going to do a color along. But here's the thing. If you don't have the exact version, so in other words, if you, let's say I was doing this with pencil, and I was, you know, talking about how great a certain pencil worked on here, and I was using it, it was blending, and it was wonderful. If you had, say, the UK version of this book, whereas I have the US version, you may get out all those pencils, and you start doing the work, and it's just not working out the same, right? Maybe you're struggling. So then, you know, for me, I get frustrated. I get discouraged. I'm like, well, obviously, I just suck. I'm no good at this because that person can get, you know, these kinds of results, and I'm not getting them. But I've found and I have a ton of books off here to the side, and I'll show you in some of them. It doesn't seem like big differences in, let's say, you know, the paper in this US book of Kirby's versus the paper in a UK version of Kirby. In fact, I'm looking at the two. Yeah, this is slightly yellower. This is slightly whiter. Run your hand over this. You run your hand over this. This is smoother than this. Not by a lot, though. But I think, was it in the front of this one? Yeah, I was doing like a little testing here with coloring with just different kinds of pens. The pigment pens, and I can't remember whether this was Staedtler. I think I did this in a previous video, again, when I was talking about paper, probably. Or maybe I was talking about those Staedtler pens. So it might have been the Staedtler pens. The ink moves better on the UK paper than on the US paper. I was coloring this page. The leaves are okay. And I'm going to zoom in. I don't know if this is going to show up on camera. I can feel it with my fingertip, but it may not show up on camera. I'll try and get as close as that's as close as I can get. Oh, sorry, don't mean to make yell. I started doing this sort of point on the compass, I guess this is. Because I wanted to make this compass like an antique gold. And my go-to combo for antique gold in using Pitt Pens is the Ivory 103 and the Raw Umber 180 and a little bit of Dark Sepia 175. And so those three together, I've used those to create kind of an antique gold. We'll even see when we go through some of my books. You'll see where I've done this in other books. So I tried doing that here. And in order for this to work, I need for the ink to move on the page. Now I know it's a water-based ink. This is just regular coloring book paper. I'm not expecting, the level of movement that you would get, say, on sized paper or watercolor paper, because those pens work amazingly on those kinds of papers. I know this is coloring book paper, but it was so hard to get that ink to move. And I can actually feel, particularly right in there, and I don't know if you can see it or not, right down here, I've like peeled up at least one layer. In fact, I can scratch off and there's still little rolled up bits of paper where I was trying to get that ink to move. And that was the point where I'm like, I can't put this out as a color along. Because here's the thing. When I do a color along, and I will, I don't want for you guys to be trying to color along, follow along with me at home, and struggling. I've colored with those pens enough that I can sort of problem solve to a certain extent on the fly, right? So as I'm coloring here and the ink's not moving, I know a little kind of, and I kind of don't even, it's just things that I've learned by doing. And honestly, that's the best advice I can give to you. If you want to learn how to use a new supply, choose some pictures in some books where you're not too concerned if things go wildly wrong and just try things. That's the best way to learn. I know color alongs are great too, but I really, really do think sort of doing it on your own and just trying, will this make the ink move the way I want it to? What if I do this? I talked about a few of those techniques, and I think I did do one color along in Johanna Basford's Small Victories, a little teeny house. I'll try and remember to link that video below. Maybe I'll link a bunch of my pigment ink videos below. And I talked about some of those techniques, you pulling the ink, putting a layer of the lightest down first and then putting dark over top. Sometimes that layer of the lightest ink first provides almost like a little bit of a slicker surface to then, I tried both of those techniques on this page, and these inks, the pigment inks, just like even this tree, you can see I based this tree with the lightest brown I was going to use, and then tried to start doing some shading back here with the darker ones. I can feel where that paper is almost on the verge of like starting to actually pull up. So I didn't want to do a color along that was going to frustrate you guys. If somebody else had Kaleidomorphia, the US edition, and you pulled out this page and you're like, awesome, I'm going to do this pigment pen color along with Connie and it's going to be great. And then you start using the pens on this paper and you're like, what is even going on? It's peeling up the paper. I can feel, there's lots of places here I can feel where these pens, they're actually pilling the paper a bit. The blends that I was getting here on these green leaves are not great. There's a distinct line where I can see the transition from one ink to another. When I color, say, in Melpomeni's books, or, again, I'll clarify this as we go. Most of the books that I've found that work the best with these pens are from the UK. Some of those Korean and Japanese books also work well. The vast majority of books printed in the US do not work well with these pens. And you guys tell me if you think this is true or if you think this is not true. I find because I have Kirby, US and UK. I have, what else do we have here? I have Johanna Basford, US and UK. I have, just looking off to the side, I actually have Melpomene, Chesapeake books, US and UK. I don't have, like, every book both. That would be silly. But I do have, usually what I'll do is I will buy, say, with Melpomene, what I did was, I think I bought the Nature Mandalas book when I was at a bookstore in a city that was fairly close to me, Winnipeg actually. And I was in a Rand McNally, and I think they had like the US edition. Because mostly here in Canada, that's what we would get. We would get US editions of books. So I bought the US edition, and I had already purchased maybe Circle of Life from Book Depository, Dear Departed Book Depository. But I made sure that I purchased the UK version, right? Because this is OUR coloring. And so I had, one of her books in the UK version, one of her books, the US version, and the covers are different, but the paper's different too. And I just wanted to try. And the US edition of Nature Mandalas is now sitting on my kind of overflow shelf, and I bought the UK edition. So I do have 2 editions of Nature Mandalas, but these I only have the UK. And I've done that with Johanna Basford. I've done that with, I'm trying to think where else. There's been a couple different books where if there is a UK edition versus a US edition, I now pretty much just try and get the UK edition, because my go-to coloring supply is, for the most part, either the Pitt Pens or now these Staedtler pens. And on the whole, the paper in the UK editions of books seems to be smoother. And because it's smoother, the ink stays on top of the paper just that fraction longer, and I'm able to move it quickly without kind of going back over and back over and back over to try and, it's kind of I guess I probably shouldn't be doing it because I don't know if it's not helping, but on US paper, and that's why it pills, that's why it pulls up, I'm going kind of back over and back over and back over, trying to get that ink to move, and it's not wanting to move. So I'm kind of wrecking the paper as I'm going, but, and I can adjust, again, I've colored with those pens enough that I can kind of adjust my coloring style to work around that. So that's what I'll do. But I didn't want to finish this color along and just frustrate everybody. So are you guys finding, do any of you ever find that? Maybe you're trying to follow a color along and, not thinking about the fact that maybe the person doing the coloring is coloring on a US version, but you have a UK version, or vice versa. Or maybe you've got, Rita Berman. Here's another example. It's not so much UK, US, but I've got a couple of my Rita Berman books here. Rita Berman is tougher to color with those pigment pens. I will say that. But certain books are harder than others. And again, I don't know, this could even be just when they were printed. Books, some of her books they're a number of years old now. I'm sure that they've gone through, reprints and what have you. I think this is one of her first, is it not? Or was the Under the Sea one first? I can't remember. This is, trying to find a date here. I can. This is 2017. So, depending on when you bought this, I'm sure it was probably printed at different times, maybe even in different places. This one says printed in Germany. And you guys, if you remember, I did a page relatively recently, a double page spread, where I did this page. And the background is ink and various other things, but all of the coloring is either Staedtler pens or Pitt pens. And they blended not badly on this this paper. Like, it was okay. I don't really feel anywhere, you know, where I was really struggling and like peeling up the paper. Like, I don't feel that anywhere here. But I do remember coloring, trying to think. So this one is the Winter Walk book. This is printed in Latvia. And I've done Pitt Pen coloring in here as well. A couple different ones. I think this was the one. Was this the one where I also did a double page? Yeah. Again, I don't... Yeah, it doesn't... I mean, it doesn't feel like I really had to work the Pitt Pens to make them blend. There was another one. Maybe it was the summer one. Maybe it was this. This is 2016. Okay, so this is even earlier. This is, again, printed in Latvia. I feel more roughness here, like from where I was coloring with those Pitt Pens. Not to the point where the paper was peeling up, but there's definitely some roughness. So again, this one's printed in Latvia. So was that other one. But there's just differences. So I guess the point to my video is, an apology. Because I probably won't release the picture in this. Again, this one's printed in Germany. I've done a couple pages in here. I did this one. This is a summer page. Last year? I think it was before my channel started. There's some pencil work on here too. Yeah, I mean, kind of an apology because I probably am not going to release that Kirby page as a color along. Just, I mean, I've got some footage, but like I say, you can kind of even hear me, not that you guys will, because I won't release it, getting frustrated in the footage, because as I'm coloring, I'm realizing, you know, if I release this, I don't know, I just feel like it would frustrate people. Melpomeni's pages in the UK editions of her books are phenomenal for Pitt Pen and Staedtler pen coloring. Like, the ink just moves, and it almost moves too much sometimes. You have to kind of, you know, sort of be careful and make sure that you're not swooshing it around too much. What else have I... So those are a couple pages I did in Enchant. I don't think I've done any in Circle of Life. Goodness, I need to get to that book. I did this page in Nature Mandalas. Whoops. Most of that is Pitt Pen. The blue background in behind is Polychromos. But the butterflies, and I mean, I don't know if you can see, I can kind of maybe go in there a bit. These weren't monarchs, I just sort of made them monarchs. You can do that with most butterflies, as long as it was just sort of a basic outline, and then I just looked at a picture of a monarch online. But, I mean, that's a pretty smooth blend for water-based markers. You know, like looking at kind of the blend from the orange into the yellow, and that's pretty smooth for water-based marker. Is it as smooth as pencils would be? No, but it's pretty close. Some of the blends up in these leaves, I mean, the Pitt Pens and the Staedtler pens just blend like an absolute dream on Melpomeni's paper. But on the UK paper, the US paper, no. So if you're... Did I do another one in here? Yeah, I did. Again, you know, the blends on that blend on the pumpkin, just looking, pretty sure, well, the very darkest around the edges might have been pencil. But, you know, the blend in the interior, that's all Pitt Pen. So, you know, when you get a paper like this, the blend on the green pepper there, again, the very darkest on the edges might be pencil, because I can see it shining a bit. Because when I did this, the Staedtler pens weren't out yet, and the Pitt pens struggled with particularly like a dark green. But now in the Staedtler pens with their 24 new colors, there are some dark greens, and I'm so excited. But anyway, so yeah, when I was doing this last year, I think with just Pitt pens, I did have to bring in some pencil to get some of the darker shades, particularly with greens and like with the orange there. Excuse me. Just because, yeah, the Pitt pens didn't have those shades. But yeah, so if I'm gonna do some color alongs with Pitt pens, I need to, if I really want to show them off to their best advantage, I need to choose my paper carefully. And I need for you guys to also realize that, you know, say I do a color along in Circle of Life, if you don't have the UK version, you're not going to get the same results that I'm going to get. And I maybe that's true for pencils too, but I think pencils maybe are a little bit more forgiving. Maybe I feel like those pigment-based pens are they're a tough taskmaster. They're picky. They like what they like, and they don't like rougher US paper. And it's not that the paper in the US is worse. Maybe it's more geared for pencil coloring artists. I think colored pencils, pencil crayons, Canadian, are maybe, I don't know. Are they the choice of supply in the US? And so that little bit rougher paper is going to work better, particularly with, you know, some of the budget brands of pencils, right? Budget brands of pencils on really smooth paper are, for me anyway, just a total exercise in frustration, because when you don't have that bit of tooth to sort of pull, you know, the lead off the pencil as you're coloring, on smoother paper with budget pencils, you just get kind of the streaky lay down, and you're not getting any color, saturation of color. It's just really frustrating. Whereas the UK versions seem to almost be made more for marker or pen coloring. I don't know. I have no idea. I'm just guessing. But yeah, so if I'm going to do, and even here I've got a few Maria Trolle books, not all of them, but I've got the Swedish version of, is this Nightfall? Nope, maybe. I'm sorry. I should know what that one is. But this is a US version of Twilight Garden. And I was just doing some playing around last night. And it's not, I can get the pens to work on this paper, but it's not nearly as comfortable as smoother paper. Now, I did do these pages, I think back in the spring sometime, and most of this is Pitt Pen color, not the background, but the leaves and the flowers. That's all Pitt Pen coloring. But I can feel that paper was starting to complain. Like I can, there's a roughness there after I'm done coloring, where the paper was starting to be like, you need to stop working me. Stop working me with those pens. So, that's a US version. Have I colored in? Well, yeah, I was doing this last night. So I've background here is just watercolor paint, but I was starting to do, just trying out a little bit of coloring. And this Swedish version, the paper wasn't complaining nearly as much about the Pitt Pens and the Staedtler pens. Still a little. It's not as nice as the Melpomene UK paper, but there was a little complaining, but not as much as in the US version. Now, again, this was probably printed in, I don't know if it actually says. It's in Swedish. Livonia Print Limited Riga. So maybe it was printed in Sweden. I don't know. Whereas the UK I'm getting all mixed up now. I don't think there is UK and US editions of Maria's books. Forgive me if I'm incorrect. This just says Gibbs Smith, publisher. Doesn't actually say where it was printed. Layton, Utah. So, I mean, it might have been printed in the U.S. I don't know that I've ever seen a UK, like, with English, but a UK spelling. Okay, now I'm thinking about that. Now I might have to research that, because I'm curious to see if that paper would be different. The paper in Small Victories, and going forward, from what I understand, the UK paper and the US paper is going to be the same. And it feels much more like... Just trying to... It was acting differently, though. It's smooth. This is a UK version of World of Flowers, which I've done quite a bit of Pitt Pen coloring in here. This is a book I hope to finish one day. Like this double page spread, this is all, the blue in the background is polychromos, but all the elements in here, that's all Pitt Pen. And if you can see, I'm just gonna get down here. Like even the blends on, you know, I've got the terracotta there, and then I've got this metal watering can. You know, that's not bad blends. There might actually be a bit of pencil on there. I'm just trying to see. Yeah, it might be a bit shiny, so maybe I cheated a bit. But the blends on the terracotta, that's all just Pitt Pen. Yeah, this is, the paper in Small Victories is different. Different again than the UK version. So there's the little color along that I did. So I don't feel where the paper was complaining. Mind you, it's pretty tiny areas. Usually a paper is going to complain it's in bigger areas because you're kind of going over and over and over. But I don't feel any roughness at all. And, you know, I don't feel any roughness at all where I used Pitt Pens in this book. I do remember trying to use Pitt Pens, though, and this was sort of before I kind of had an understanding of you know, how much difference the paper would make. I remember trying to use Pitt Pens in a US version of one of Johanna's books and was so shocked. In fact, if I remember correctly, I was trying to do, because she always gives you these coloring test palettes at the back of the book, and I remember doing some testing, and the Pitt Pen actually was ghosting on the other side, which I have never had a Pitt Pen ghost in a UK version. But in the US version, I did. So paper can make so much difference, and that's why, because I do want people to, you know, if you're going to try out using the Staedtler pens or the Pitt Pens, I really want people to have the best experience, because I love using them so much, and I don't want people to be watching, you know, my videos and trying it out and then be like, Coloring Chemist lied, this was a terrible experience. This is a Hannah Carlson book. This is Gibbs Smith again, which was the Maria Trolla, the UK book, right? I did this one relatively recently. There was some complaining by the pens, but not a whole lot. And I think I got okay blends going there. And then I think this is an older book. Is this still Gibbs Smith? Yeah, it's still Gibbs Smith. Doing a little bit of coloring there. I don't feel any complaining by the paper. This was all, the background was oil pastel, but this was all Pitt Pen. I'm trying to remember though, I may have sprayed this with workable fixative before I did the Pitt Pen coloring. That makes the blends work really nicely. So there's a tip for you. If you ever have paper in a book and you want to be coloring with, say, Pitt Pens or pigment pens, and you think, oh, this paper is just really rough and I'm not going to get good blends, spray with workable fixative first. I will say though, if you do that, if you get your nose right down to the blends, we're going to get our nose right down. Can you see how it almost gets a little speckly? The inks move fantastically, but because the workable fixative has that little tiny bit of a speckly, kind of roughish, not super rough, but a little bit rough texture, then yeah, your blends, they're going to be a tiny bit speckly if you get your nose right down in there. But I mean, if you look at it from, you know, normal distance, I think it looks good. I think it, you know, the blends work well. So yeah, the one place I would not suggest using Pitt pens or Staedtler pens, unless you're just wanting them to base your image, but you're never going to get nice smooth blends using Pitt pens or Staedtler pens on Amazon paper. You just aren't. Unless you pre-treat it. I mean, you could pre-treat it with satin glazing liquid. That would probably help. You could, again, spray the workable fixative over the page before you start. That would probably help. But I'm just trying to... I don't even think that's Amazon paper. That's even the Creative Haven paper. I don't think I've done any... In fact, I don't think I have. I don't... Yeah. I can't show you coloring with Pitt pens because I just don't do it. It just doesn't work out. So, what? All of that is to say, I think that you will probably see maybe some Pitt pen tutorials from me, hopefully in the not too distant future, hopefully nearer rather than, you know, sooner rather than later. But it's not going to be this. It's not going to be this page, because this, I think, would just frustrate people too much. Maybe if any of you are still here, I know it's 42 minutes of just me yammering about paper and what works and what doesn't. If any of you are still here, if there's any books in particular where you would like to see me use Pitt pens or the Staedtler pens, let me know in the comments. I can respond to you then, let you know, do I think that's going to be a good idea? Is it just going to be frustrating? If you would like to see me do even a small, maybe not a whole picture, but small portion of a picture in a book like this, or in an Amazon printed book, where it's really not going to be easy, and you want to see, I can try and explain all the little things that I do to try and get a blend and try and, even though it's not really working, try and do what I can. I can try to do that, I can't guarantee how helpful it will be, but let me know if that's something you want to see. But yeah, I think if I'm going to do, a great big long color along where hopefully you guys can follow along and really get nice results, it might end up being in a Johanna Basford UK book or a Melpomene UK book. The Maria Trolla and the Hannah Carlson books, I think, are a little bit more touchy, tricky, and any UK I keep getting this backwards. Any US editions of books are going to be super tricky and touchy. So, just let me know in the comments. What do you think? Do you guys find that too? Like, or any of you maybe colorists with other kinds of water-based pens? Maybe not necessarily the pigment pens, but Tombows or anything like that. Do you find a difference in the way they work and blend when you've got different books printed in different places? Even if you have, say you bought a second copy of a book that was your original copy was, maybe it was one of those Rita Berman books from like 2017, and you bought it back then, and you've since then bought yourself a second copy. Do you find differences in, even the same book printed in the same country, but, 6, 7, 8 years apart? Do you find differences there? Yeah, I'd be interested to know. So that is it for this video. I apologize again for not doing what I said I was going to do. And I apologize if this sounds like an apology video. It really, I guess it is. I apologize if it sounds like I'm making excuses, but I just feel like this would just be too frustrating. So I hope everyone is safe. I hope everyone is well. I hope everyone is enjoying their coloring. If you like what you're seeing on my channel, consider subscribing to the channel, clicking that like button on the videos, hitting the notification bell, leaving me a comment. All those things help my channel to grow. Letting friends know, on different social media platforms that you found a channel that you like and they might like it too, and share with them. All right, folks. Until next time, take care. Bye-bye.